Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and today, that is the first day of January 2023. What I'm going to do now is continue my reading of the Redemption Manual 4.5. I'm glad you're here. I hope that you can understand what I'm sharing with you. This is the whole idea of redeeming ourselves to end slavery in our own lives and to be free people again. And there are others who have done this, as I've listed just a while ago. So we're going to continue reading the particular book here, Redemption 4.5. That is a manual, that is. And we're going to start here on the subject of sovereignty. A lot of these things are being said to you over and over. The reason why they're told you, spoken to you over and over, is to get it in your head to understand what really took place, so that you can understand it and be able to explain it to others, which is important, but also for yourselves. Okay. And, most people today just assume that they're free. They don't, they get upset about taxation and this and that. But in reality, they think they're truly free, but they're not. This whole invisible fence has been put around them. So on the subject of sovereignty, we'll read here, since 1933, you and other walks of life, including the so-called Americans, have been pledged for the debt of the social compact, or constructs known as the United States in all caps, to which people have been deluded into believing that they owe some allegiance to such, by and through which debt is alleged to be owed to international bankers, most of whom are foreign to our condition or implied as so, by and through the education which we receive within the constructs of control. Your credit, your labor, your productivity, and property has been used and are now being used as collateral by the Incorporated United States of America, in all caps, without your knowledge or consent. This is legal until you take back your implied consent by a special lawful purpose or process. In fact, you're unknowingly volunteering to be chattel for a mortgage held by financiers from the founding of this nation. Perhaps you infer that the name of on the tax statement is yours, so you respond as though it were. This is voluntary servitude. To make the servitude legal, it was necessary to cut a hole in the fence. No matter that the escape route is hidden, obscured by legal brambles that make escape difficult, that it is not used, that it is not used presumes consent. You see, it is not impossible, just seemingly difficult and even impossible. Your state of fact as a subject is based upon a presumption that if you did not wish to be so encumbered, you would use whatever law to do something about it, as long as you do not use the escape route provided by such law that may be available. It is presumed that you are content to remain in the pasture and be milked and used as chattel. This word has the same root as the word cattle. You get the picture? Can such a premise be true? It seems totally out of step with everything you and I have ever known about the so-called world, our so-called nation, our so-called government, and our so-called relationship to it. Our parents never behaved as though that we were chattel. They duly paid their so-called taxes, voted in so-called elections, and waved a so-called American flag on the 4th of July. Our so-called teachers taught us about our history, our alleged so-called Declaration of Independence, and our so-called Constitution, our so-called Revolutionary War. How we fought the greatest army and navy the world has ever seen at the time. Nowhere in the so-called history classes do we encounter any such premise of subjection to a so-called central government that rules our very lives in every manner. Our so-called civics teachers never told us anything about this. Nothing in our so-called world even ever hinted that we were subjects to a highly centralized government. Surely this could not be true of other peoples, could it? And surely we would not subject ourselves to this. For most people, this cannot be. The truth cannot be heard because it is too discordant with people's entire experience. And yet, we can document that Mr. George Washington did not chop down a cherry tree. Mr. Abraham did not free the slaves. They became subject to the federal district, that is the District of Columbia. The war with Mexico was begun by by a general, that is Mr. Zachary Taylor. Provocations along the Nueces River, that's the Nueces River. The battleship Maine blew up from the inside. Mr. Woodrow Wilson knew that the ship known as the Lusitania was carrying United States munitions to the war in Europe. and would be sunk. Mr. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had maneuvered the Japanese by an ongoing oil embargo around Japan a year earlier, which led to the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and to guarantee success, and had cut fuel shipments to the Pacific Fleet to ensure the presence of enough old ships to offer a tempting target. Mr. Harry Truman knew that there were other good alternatives to an invasion of Japan and did not need to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Mr. Franklin, that is FDR, knew about the Nazis' concentration camps. Mr. Lyndon B. Johnson knew that there was no attack on the ships. The Maddox internal joy in the Gulf of Tonkin when he asked for congressional resolution to attack North Vietnam. And the so-called military social government construct known as the United States has been warned by numerous documented sources that there would be an attack on the World Trade Center in New York, in the military compact known as Pentagon. All of this is from documented historical sources. Yet we continue to believe the myths that are in the histories, their movies, their mainstream media, and their mass consciousness. Mr. John Fitzgerald Kennedy warned us of that. The great enemy of truth is very often not the lie, that is delivered, contrived, and dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and realistic. And that's what we're living in, folks. You will probably find it hard to accept that you have been living in illusion for your whole life. Most of what you believe is illusion, and you will only find your freedom when you can allow yourself to look behind the veils of illusion to see reality. Who you are is far greater than what you perceive yourself to be. When you have the courage to stand face to face with the illusion and call it what it is, you will have stepped through the most difficult task set before you on your earth journey. There is a way out, but the only way out is through understanding how he came to this predicament and by following a precise formula to attain your sovereignty from the illusion. We have been warned repeatedly throughout their history, but we weren't listening very closely, were we? Now we might have one more chance to take back our power and our sovereignty from those who seek to control. Through the creative rewriting of history, all people, that is subjects, we're in this predicament because we have failed to accept the liability of self-government in support of international public order by emerging into a political status that allows us to freely determine our own futures that are established not only for ourselves, but for our posterity. This is, when you talk about posterity, it's for your children. What are you going to say? I'm not trying to give you a guilt trip here, but if you have kids, what are you passing down to them? Are you telling them about this here? If they're teenagers, are you making them aware of this? What are you doing about it? It's your responsibility as a parent, as a mom or dad, to tell them the truth. And are you actually teaching them the real truth, you see? All our lives, we look for the roots of war, injustice, and oppression because if we can find the basis of the rampant injustice in the world, we could relieve enormous struggle and suffering. We wonder how little the so-called Constitution seemed to affect the courts and how often the truth was buried in silence. Mostly we saw greed and heartlessness in a power struggle played out in politics. But we didn't realize that the game had been played in secret throughout their American history. And ultimately, in the game of monetary policy and politics with a spiritual component, plus the true hidden knowledge that the documentary evidence and principle application as to how rights and privileges of immunities are established or enforced are never revealed to the people by and through the system of education institutions, not for their benefit, but for the sole and express benefit to keep control of all people through such centers of education from womb to tomb. Like you, we watched and participated in the so-called historical illusionary scene for many years, whether you call it American or some other name, wherever your such constructs exist. Many have written letters to the so-called editor, congressmen, senators, and presidents to try to get the so-called government to answer questions about the origin of authority to rape, pillage, plunder, and outright murder the people throughout this country. We have been educated to believe we had a right to question authority for. If we did not, we would end up with despots, tyranny. Well, after all this, the question remains, now what do I do? A peek in the mind of a Tory, T-O-R-Y. In 1999, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned the Florida State Supreme Court's decision to proceed with a recount of the contested ballots at the 11th District Court decision to uphold the decision of the Florida court. In an Orwellian doublespeak, the Chief Justice, Mr. Antonio Scalia, wrote on Saturday, December 9, 1999, "The counting of the votes that are in questionable legality does, in my view, threaten irreparable harm to Bush and to the country by casting a cloud upon which he claims to be legitimacy of his election. Count first and rule upon legality afterwards is not a recipe for producing election results that have the public acceptance democratic stability required." It was brazen, an Orwellian declaration. One so-called American who attempted to continue to believe in the democracy could claim that something was wrong with counting votes first. Right. He stepped beyond his jurisdiction, folks, way beyond his jurisdiction. So what so-called American who attempts to continue to believe in a democracy could declare one candidate the winner and protect him from irreparable harm? If the vote count showed him not to be the winner after all, of course, it doesn't make any sense unless you realize the foundation upon which Mr. Antonio Scalia based his transparency partisan remark. He doesn't believe in democracy, you see. He doesn't even believe in republicanism. He's a monarchist who is only enforcing, shall we say, martial law, where he decides the outcome of the soon political vote of the people via orders of the commander-in-chief. Mr. Antonio Scalia revealed his true motivations when he spoke on the subject of capital punishment at the University of Chicago, that is in February 2002. During his remarks, he stated, "The reaction of people of faith to this tendency of democracy to obscure the divine authority behind government should not be resigned to it, but the resolution to combat it as effectively as possible." Democracy obscuring divine authority behind government. Perhaps this helps shed some light on why Mr. Antonio Scalia and the four other right-wing justices, of the so-called left-wing justices, watch it happen without raising a public outcry that could so easily subvert what we have been taught as being our election process, and through an act of divine justice intervention ushered the son onto the throne, while some 8 years earlier by his father, George I. We are assuming that we are still independent sovereigns and the so-called free man is declared by their own, that is, I assume, Declaration of Independence, and that their constitution is still in effect. Mr. Antonio Scalia has no such illusions, folks. History supports his position. Sorry to say that, though. Mr. Antonio Scalia is an ideologue, so accustomed to our acceptance and willingness to continue to be subject of their beliefs, which were given to us to control us, that he does not even consider the idea of a government of, by, and for the people, because he truly knows it never existed for anyone other than those who were signatory to the creation of the social compact for their benefit and that of their posterity and their present condition of the so-called military social government construct known as the United States. But the idea that such creation of a social compact contractually applied to all walks of life has remained as useful fiction to be taught in civil classes and mouthed by politicians. He knows that we have been reduced by such educational tools of the controllers of the public education to being mere chattel by presumption and general acquisition. Since we have not even discovered that our status as sovereigns has been lost through more than 200 years of their history, much less withdraw our implied consent to be subject of their history, we are presumed to be subjects before their so-called courts in the minds of people like Antonio Scalia. Mr. Antonio Scalia speaks of civil disobedience with contempt and quotes the Bible. You must needs be subject. We must, as mere servants of the ruling class, acquisition to their divinely guided leaders. But who are we as mere subjects? To question those who make or interpret the laws. After all, he says that government carries a sword as the minister of God to execute wrath upon the evildoer. No, he is not reverted to a justice of another time. We have, by our ignorance and silence, acquisition to a lower status reminiscent of another time by accepting their history as ours and allowing their tools of public education to continue to foster upon us and our posterity delusional concepts which reduce not only ourselves but our children to ultimately slavery. There you have it. In his eyes, we are subjects, unworthy of honor, peace, and justice. Somehow, Mr. Antonio's scale statement seems like a long way from the Declaration of Independence, in which so-called Americans were taught that they stood before the world as sovereigns, invested with certain unalienable birthrights, including the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. After the so-called American revolutions, the monarchies of Europe saw democracy as an unnatural, ungodly, ideological threat, every bit as radical and dangerous as communism was regarded by the Western nations upon its inception. Just as the 1917 communist revolution in Russia sprouted other revolutions around the world, the so-called American Revolution provided as ample incentive for people all over the world to overthrow their European monarchs or other such forms of government which were oppressive. What has happened? When did we give up our natural when did we give up our natural creative given rights? The Declaration of Independence recognized that all people are sovereign under natural law of the supreme creator, pillars of universal law. Sovereign people of the various estates created a social compact called the state governments for the protection of their rights and that of their posterity. They delegated certain authority from their assumed powers of the earth to which the law of nature and nature's creator entitled them by and through the contractual state constitutions in order that these three branches of their government could presumably carry out the dictates outlined in their agency compact party state constitution to protect their rights and that of their future posterity. The agency states then created the social compact, that is a union of states known as the United States of America. The so-called Constitution of the United States for the United States of America created a new structure of a compact. You hear what he said here? Start over. The so-called Constitution of the United States for the United States of America created a new structure of a compact party agency government that was established on a much more divided plan of agency government than either the parliamentary system or the Confederation of the United States of America. It was a constitutional republic, simply put, because the compact party states had reserved to themselves the express right of appointing among their separate legislatures, that is, senators serve as the interests of the states within the senators to serve in the interests of the states within the Senate of the United States, and a certain amount was delegated to the federal government. The United States, by way of the United States and Congress, assembled as certain powers delegated by the Constitution of the United States. So far as the several states of the Union are party to the Constitution are concerned, the United States and Congress Assembly may not exercise power not delegated by the Constitution. All power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution is reserved to the several states within their respective territorial borders, or to the people who created the social compact known as we the people of the United States, who created a more perfect union for themselves and their posterity for the United States of America. Note that the United part is an underscore, it's a little small u instead of a capitalized u. So we're going to go and I don't know, I see what time phrase we're looking at here, 18 minutes. I think, thinking about some. So this is the, let's continue on. This is a sample, and it's called the Memorandum of Law with Points and Authorities on Sovereignty of the People, in relation to government of the several compact de facto states and the federal government. This is to such and such. To whom these presidents shall come, greetings. Take notice that it is well understood that fact of American history that the most dynamic document that set the course of American Declaration of Independence. It was and is the document that discloses the tyranny of English government. It has expressed the elements of the rights of men within any society, that all men are created equal. The Declaration of Independence stipulates the chain of authority within governments, and of the obvious fact that the people created government, that it was the people who instituted government, and in so doing, the people secured these rights, and the government at every level derives their just powers from the consent of the government. It is also a well-established fact that the people did not give up all their power to government. The Declaration of Independence creates the sovereignty in the people, not in the government. Therefore, the people are above the creature they created, government, and that those who work for or in government are public servants and have placed themselves in a subservient position to serve the people within their function /office /position via their oath of office. In regards to the principle established in the Declaration of Independence and the subsequent constitutions written and created by it, And of the true sovereignty, a written constitution is not only the direct and basic expression of the sovereign will, it is also absolute rule of action, decision for all departments and offices of government with respect to all matters covered by it and proceeding after it. And it must control as it is written until it is changed by the authority which established it, that is, the people. For reference, see State, that is XREL, Crenshaw versus Joseph, 175 ALA 579, 57 SO dot 942, semicolons, Schiff, that is SCHMITT, versus FW Cook Brewing Company, 187 MD 623, 120, capital N, capital E, period, 19, 3, A dot, capitalize A dot, capitalize L dot, R, capitalize R dot, 270, semicolon, Collins versus Martin, 209 PA dot 388, 139 A, that is capitalize A, 122, 55, again with capitalize A dot, capitalize L dot, capitalize R dot, 311, Travelers Insurance Company versus Marshall, 124 TEX dot, 45, 76, capitalize S, capitalize W, 2D 1007, 96 AIR, that is all capitalized, dot 802, semicolon, State X RD, period, Lemon versus Langren, LANGILIE, 45, Wash, WAS, H dot 2D 82 273 P dot 2D 464. And take notice of the following cases and points. For when the revolution took place, the people of each state became themselves sovereigns. This is Martin, ETAL versus the lessee of Waddell. This is 1342, 41 U.S. In parentheses, 16, capital PET, 367, 410, 10 L, capital L dot ED, 997, 1013. I'm not going to go through all this again, folks. You're just going to have to trust me. This is a long, see, I didn't realize you're going to be going through all this. But anyway, here we go. The state constitution is the supreme law written by the supreme powers of the state people themselves. This is based upon, if you want this information, you need to look in the redemption manual and you can download it yourself. Okay. This will take forever for me to go through. The Constitution is the voice of the people speaking in their sovereign capacity, and it must be heeded. When the Constitution speaks with reference to a particular matter, it must be given effects as the paramount law of the land. This is based upon people versus parts. Sovereignty itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law, but it is our system. While sovereign powers are delegated to the agency of government, sovereignty itself remains with the people, by whom and for whom all governments exist and acts. And the law is the definition and limitation of power. Number 5, under our system, the people who were there, that is in England, called subjects, are here the sovereign. Their rights, whether collectively or individual, are not bound to give way to a sentiment of loyalty to the persons of a monarch. The system here, that is in America, knows no person, however in years to those in power, or how powerful himself to whom he needs yield the rights which the law secures to him. 6, here in America, sovereignty rests with the people. It is true that at English common law, the duty of Attorney General was to represent the king, he being the embodiment of the state. But under the democratic form of government now prevailing, the people are king. So the authority, the Attorney General duties are to that sovereign rather than to the machinery of government. Number 8, local laws or ordinances enacted by a city must be consistent with the state constitution. Number 9, it is the duty of all officials, whether legislative, judicial, executive, administrative, or ministerial, to so perform every official act as not to violate constitutional provisions. Number 10, the provisions of the Constitution must be given effect even if in doing so a statute is held to be inoperative. Number 11, the Constitution was made not to act upon legislative department alone, but upon every department of the government. 12, courts should not tolerate or condone disregard of law and arbitrary usurpation of power on the part of any officer, and neither should the people. Number 13, the officers of the law In the execution of process are obliged to know the requirements of law. If they mistake them, whether through ignorance or design, and anyone is harmed by their error, they must respond in damages. 14. It is a general rule that an officer, that is, executive, administrator, quasi-judicial, ministerial, or otherwise, who acts outside the scope of his jurisdiction and without authorization of law, may thereby render himself amenable to personal liability. 15. If a public officer authorizes the doing of an act not within the scope of his authority, he would be held liable. 16. In our country, the people are sovereign, and the government cannot sever its relationship with the people. 17. In common usage, the term person does not include the sovereign, and statutes employing its will ordinarily not be construed to do so. Number 18. Since its common use, the term person does not include a sovereign, statutes not implying the phrases are ordinarily construed to exclude it. Number 19. Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. Number 20. The Congress cannot revoke the sovereign power of the people. Perry versus the United States. Number 21. There is no such thing as a power of inherited sovereignty in the government of the United States. In this country, sovereignty resides in the people, and Congress can exercise no power which they have not, by their Constitution, entrusted to it. All else is withheld. Number 22. All that government does in provide legitimacy is the pursuit of its duties to provide protection for its private rights, which duty is debt owed to its creator, we the people, all caps, and the private disenfranchised individual, which debt and duty is never extinguished nor discharged and is perpetuated. No matter what the government/state provides for us in matter of convenience and safety, the disenfranchised individual owes nothing to the government. Number 23. Under our form of government, the legislature is not supreme. It is only one of the organs that are absolutely sovereign, which resides in the whole body of the people. Like other bodies of the government, it can only exercise such powers as have been delegated to it. And when it steps beyond that boundary, its acts are utterly void. Number 24. We, the people, have discharged any debt which may be said to exist or be owed to the state or government. The governments are, however, indebted continually to the people, because the people, that is, their sovereigns, created the government corporation, and because we suffer its continued existence. The continued debt owed to the people is discharged only as it continues not to violate our private rights. When government fails in its duty to provide protection, that is, discharge its debt to the people, it is abandonment. That is an injury of any and all power, authority, or vestige of sovereignty, which is possessed, and the laws remain the same, the sovereign reverting to the people whence it came. 25. The individual may stand upon his constitutional right as a citizen. He is entitled to carry on his private business in his own way. His power to contract is unlimited. He owes no duty to the state, to his neighbors, to divulge his business or to open his doors to investigation. He owes no duty to the state, since he receives nothing therefrom. Beyond the protection of his life and property, his rights are such as existed by the law of the land, long antecedent to the organization of the state, and can only be taken from him by due process of the law in accordance with the Constitution. He owes nothing to the public as long as he does not trespass upon their rights. Number 26. The people or the sovereign are not bound by general words and statutes, restrictive or prerogative right, title, or interest, unless expressly named. Acts of limitation do not bind as the king nor the people. The people have been ceded all the rights of the king, the former sovereign. It is a maxim of the common law that when an act of parliament is made for the public good, the advancement of religion and justice, and to prevent injury and wrong, the king shall be bound by such an act, though not named, but when a statute in general, and in prerogative rights, title, or interest would be divested of, taken from the king or the peoples. In such cases, you shall not be bound. I want to point out simply this number 26. All these have court cases. These are court cases. These are case law. Okay, so they're supported here. And I'm not giving you all the court cases because I'd be here all night. The Supreme Court, in the case of Wills versus Michigan State Police, made it carefully clear that the sovereign could not be named in any statute or merely a person or any person. Number 28. Sovereign itself is, of course, not subject to law, for it is the author and source of law. The law describes to the king, I'm sorry, this is number 29. The law describes to the king in America the people the attribute of sovereignty. He is sovereign and independent within his own dominion and owes no kind of subjection to any other potentiality upon earth. Hence it is, and no suit or action can be brought against the king, even in civil matters, because no court can have jurisdiction over him. For all jurisdiction implies supremacy of power. Number 30. People of a state are entitled to all rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. Number 31. In Europe, the executive is synonymous with the sovereign power of the state, where it is too commonly acquired by force or fraud, or both. In America, however, the case is widely different. Our government is founded upon compact. Sovereignty was and is in the people. Number 32. In the United States, the people are sovereign, and the government cannot sever its relationship to the people by taking away their citizenship. Note, the following definitions of sovereignty is from Bouvier's 14th edition Law Dictionary, quoting from 4 Wheat, WHEAT 402. It has been justly thought a matter of importance to determine from that what source the United States derives its authority. The question here proposes whether our bond of union is to compact entered into by the states, or whether the Constitution is an organic law established by the people. To this we answer, we the people ordained and established this Constitution. The government of the state had only delegated powers from the people, and even if they had an inclination, they had no authority to transfer the authority of the sovereign people. The people in their capacity as sovereigns made and adopted the Constitution, and it binds the state governments without their state consent. The United States as a whole therefore emanates from the people and not from the states and the Constitution and the laws of the states, whether made before or since the adoption of that Constitution of the United States, are subordinate to the United States Constitution and the laws made in pursuit of it. The people are the fountain of sovereignty. The whole was originally with them as their own. The state governments are but trustees, acting under a derived authority and had no power to delegate what is not delegated to them. But the people, as the original fountain, might take away what they had lent and entrust to whom they pleased. They had the whole title, and absolute proprietors had the right of using or abusing, that is just utentiae el abutini. I don't know if that's correct Latin, but anyway, it's a maximum concentration in public law as well as common sense and the necessity of the case that a sovereign is answerable for his acts only to his God and his own consciousness. There is no authority above sovereign to which as appeal can be made. And here we are at number 33. The Congress cannot revoke the sovereign power of the people to override their will as thus declared. Note, the above points and authorities are not exhaustive and additions can be added at any time. The sovereign is answerable only to God and conscience. Caveat. So this is another thing you'll be filling out. Again, this is critical. You'll be sending this via certified mail. Notice in demand made upon you to review and respond to the above memorandum at each point authorities and enumerated above, documented upon the public record by certified U.S. mail to the sovereign, addressed below to the notary address as indicated below within 15 days upon receipt of the memorandum, allowing up to 3 days grace for return mail delivery. Failure to do so by as either a public servant who by the oath of office or duty as an officer, as an agent or employee of the government, created corporation, municipality, etc., and or by through your position, office, or superior knowledge of the law will place you in default. And the presumption will be taken upon the private and public record that you and your office fully agrees to the points and authorities contained within the memorandum, and that the points and authorities are true, correct, and certain. And that one of the we the people has named below, his her seal signature is sovereign within the collective capacity of said we the people possess true sovereign power. So this is a form that you send out to them. Okay. I'm going to continue down here. So that'll be it for the night. That's section 3. We'll start tomorrow on section 4. And this will be understanding the straw man / debtor. So I appreciate you being here tonight. I hope that what I'm sharing with you is important, because it is important. So I know it's late. And again, my information is on my YouTube channel, Discerning What Is True. That is YouTube. And it is also on Facebook the day I produced it. That is to today. So I will end the broadcast tonight. Wish you a good evening, and thank you for listening, and have a good day.